The number of people seeking jobless benefits jumped sharply last week, after 2 straight weeks of declines. The increase undermines hopes that unemployment claims, after falling 4 times in the previous 5 weeks, were on a sustained downward trend. That would signal layoffs were slowing and hiring was picking up. Instead, claims remain stuck at an elevated level. The Labor Department said this morning, November 4, 2010, that initial claims for unemployment aid rose by 20,000 to a seasonally adjusted 457,000 for the week ending October 30. Wall Street analysts polled by Thomson Reuters had expected a smaller rise. Claims have fluctuated around the 450,000 level all year. They will need to drop below 425,000 to signal sustained job gains. The Federal Reserve today announced that they will be implementing $600 billion in additional quantitative easing by the end of June 2011. The Federal Reserve will maintain its current policy of reinvesting principal payments from its security holdings and will expand its balance sheet by an additional $75 billion per month. The total announced balance sheet expansion was $100 billion higher than the public consensus of $500 billion. The Federal Reserve will continue to hold interest rates at record low levels of 0% to 0.25%, where they have been for nearly 2 years. Quantitative easing is nothing more than the Federal Reserve printing money and creating inflation. This quantitative easing steals from the purchasing power of the incomes and savings of all Americans. While Americans are distracted by the mainstream media with daily debates by the Democrats and Republicans about taxes, U.S. taxes have almost nowhere near the effect on the lives of middle-class Americans as does the Federal Reserve's monetary policy and quantitative easing. Instead of millions of Americans attending Tea Party events in Washington with Glenn Beck and Sarah Palin, they should be marching outside of the Federal Reserve building in New York chanting, "In the Fed." The Federal Reserve is doing everything in its power to push stock market prices up so that the government can take credit for an economic recovery, but as NIA has been warning for years, inflation gravitates most towards the goods that Americans need most in order to live and survive. There is nothing that Americans need more than food. The agricultural commodity price increases of the past 2 months will begin to make their way into all supermarkets nationwide during the next few months. Americans who have been struggling just to make their mortgage payments will now be forced to stop paying their mortgage in order to buy food. Instead of hoping to get the latest Apple gadget for Christmas this holiday season, American children better be grateful if their parents are able just to put food on the table. After the financial crisis of late 2008 early 2009 when the Federal Reserve implemented its first round of quantitative easing, the Dow Jones rallied by 74% from its low in March of 2009 to a high in April of 2010. By the Dow Jones rallying, the U.S. government was able to take credit for creating an economic recovery despite the fact that unemployment remained near multi-decade highs. On July 19, with the Dow Jones having declined by 11% from its April high down to 10,073.68, everybody in the mainstream media was talking about the threat of deflation. NIA released an article on July 19 entitled, "Double-dip recession does not mean deflation," in which it said, NIA believes the Federal Reserve is quietly getting ready to implement the mother of all quantitative easing. NIA went on to say, NIA fears that come this October, Bernanke is likely to shoot up his largest ever dose of quantitative easing. No human being alive, especially Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke, is smart enough to perfectly manage the rate of price inflation by printing money. By expanding the balance sheet by $600 billion, NIA believes the real price inflation rate will rise above 10% in early 2011. Once Americans realize just how rapidly their dollars are being debased and losing their purchasing power, it could cause a rush out of the US dollar and trigger hyperinflation as early as year 2012. America no longer has a free market economy. For everybody on Wall Street to be so fixated on the words that come out of Bernanke's mouth, it shows that the economic system we have is extremely fragile and vulnerable to collapse at any time. With prices of assets soaring in recent months just in anticipation of Bernanke's quantitative easing announcement, it shows that the world's financial system is already flooded with trillions of dollars in excess liquidity. Unless the U.S. government immediately implements dramatic spending cuts across the board, NIA believes the world is going to lose confidence in the US dollar and it will be impossible for the US to survive past the year 2015 without the US dollar becoming worthless. The fact that the Republicans took control of the House of Representatives last night is completely meaningless. If the U.S. government is to implement the spending cuts necessary in order to prevent hyperinflation, Americans will be faced with a second Great Depression, which NIA believes is a necessity and much better than the alternative. However, the Republicans will not risk being held responsible for the next Great Depression, because it will ensure Obama gets re-elected in 2012. Therefore, NIA predicts that nothing is going to change with the Republicans taking over the House.